Welcome, HBCU faculty, students, and alumni. We want to thank you for coming to Web3 Smart Contracts and Use Cases presented by Philip Rage and Trey Buckingham. Philip Rage is a director within Aon's Growth Ventures strategy team. Prior to joining Aon 6 months ago, Phil started off his career at a small independent insurance brokers specializing in hedge funds and investment managers before moving to work as an underwriter at large U.S. insurance company at a Lloyd's of London syndicate, and then on to run the financial institutions team at the world's largest international underwriting agency. Trey Buckingham is a strategy analyst at Aon's Growth Ventures, Aon's net new innovation function focused on investing ahead of revenue for new solutions and capabilities tailored to large unmet client needs. Before joining Aon Growth Ventures in January 2023, Trey was an account executive with Aon's large market account team, where he was responsible for managing some of Aon's largest client relationships. He also worked as sales and operations analyst and played a key role in the continued development of Aon's industry practice groups. Prior to joining Aon, Trey earned a Bachelor of Science degree in finance from Miami University's Farmer School of Business. We want to thank everyone for joining us today. Thank you to Robin Perkins for help organizing and facilitating this event. Thank you to the National FinTech Center's team for help organizing this event as well. At the end, we will have a Q&A. For Q&A, please put all of the questions in the Q&A box at the bottom with your name and affiliation. Without further ado, we'll kick it off to Philip Rage and Trey Buckingham.
Great, thank you. Can everyone see my screen?
Correct.
Can everyone see the screen? Okay, great.
Yeah.
So hi, everyone. Thank you all for joining, and especially thank you to Morgan State University for hosting Phil and myself to come talk about smart contracts and maybe a little bit of insurance. I also want to give a special thanks to Tynesa Brown from MSU and Robin Perkins from Aon for helping us prepare the last few weeks. Before we kick off and introduce ourselves, we'd just like to say that our thoughts go out to the faculty, students, and families affected by last week's events, and how impressive your community has united and responded. So with that, we're grateful to be here with you all. My name is Trey Buckingham. I've been with Aon for 5 years, and in those 5 years, I've had the privilege to call New York City, Miami, and now Chicago home. So why was I selected to come talk to you about smart contracts? Well, one is I'm ideologically bought in. Along with many in the crypto industry, I share the belief that our lives and economies are becoming increasingly more digital dependent. And as a function of that dependency, I believe that digital property ownership, which is enabled by blockchain, should be a fundamental right and priority. And the second, some would argue more important, is that I'm financially bought in. Some would say I have skin in the game. My journey in crypto really started in 2017 when the price of Bitcoin shot up to 20,000 USD. And since then, I've invested in a mix of companies, protocols, and NFTs. And lucky for me, I found a job that allows me to work on many of the things I enjoy, including Web3 and crypto. And through this job, I've had the absolute pleasure of working with Phil every day, and I'll let him introduce himself now.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having Trey and I here. Similar to Trey, maybe a bit more corporate. As highlighted, I previously was an underwriter at an insurance company, and I noticed an unmet client need when it came to Web3 digital assets, this space. The insurance industry can be a bit slow at reacting to new technology trends. I'll talk a bit about that towards the end of this presentation. But I was brought in, maybe not financially, but by the spirit of it and the decentralized nature, but also just the problems that needed solving. So that's a bit about me. On that note, I'll pass back to Trey, who will talk you through smart contracts more broadly.
Great. So before we start, I think it's useful to level set on where we are today. So it's no secret that crypto is in the middle of a bear market. Both prices and sentiment are low. But at the same time, the pace of development in the space has grown exponentially. Even at non-crypto native companies like Google, Nike, and Aon, there are dedicated teams who spend their days advancing that green line you see on the screen. A popular phrase in the industry is bear markets are for building. And it's true. There isn't a day that goes by where I don't hear of a new company, breakthrough, or feature release. And this is starting to be reflected in the recent headlines. This headline from Visa is one of our favorites. It says that blockchains are entering their broadband era. So why is this significant? The broadband era refers to a time in the early 2000s when high-speed internet became widely available for consumers and businesses. High-speed internet unlocked things like cloud computing, online gaming, and social media. So blockchain technology today is where high-speed internet was in the year 2000. Blockchains are ready for prime time, and we're at the very beginning of a massive movement on-chain. So it's a really exciting time to be in the space. So before we dive into smart contracts, let's refresh on the fundamentals. So crypto can come off as complex. You'll often hear fans of crypto say, with passion, that blockchain is this inevitable thing, it's going to happen, and Bitcoin is going to $1 million. You hear it all the time from people in the space. On the other hand, most people view it as a niche or failed experiment. This disparity can be explained by a cognitive bias known as the curse of knowledge or the curse of expertise, which basically says that crypto people do a bad job of explaining crypto because they've forgotten what it's like to learn crypto for the first time. And this kind of like cartoon illustrates that. And while Phil and I don't call ourselves experts, neither of us have a technical background. We acknowledge that this bias exists and we aim to do a less bad job of explaining it today. So please, if you have any questions, put them in the Q&A and we'll try and get to them at the end. And also, if it makes you feel better, I ran this through my sister last night and I think she got the hang of it. So we're gonna do our best here. All right, starting off, what is a blockchain? At its core, a blockchain can be thought of like a digital payment system, similar to Venmo or Cash App. Another way people like to describe it is like a public ledger. And while they can do more, blockchains primarily used to facilitate and track the transfer of digital money. In the context of payments, a blockchain has two jobs. The first job is to track historical payments. This is what we call the chain. And you can think of the chain like a public Venmo feed or a list of transactions shown in the order they occur. The chain shows who sent money to who and how much money was sent. So what are blocks? Blocks are literally just blocks of transactions. On the Ethereum blockchain, a new block is added to the chain every 12 seconds, which means that new transactions are added to the feed in 12-second increments. The second job of a blockchain is to track the current balances of all accounts. This is called the state. The state is just a list of every account on the network and their corresponding balance. The state is refreshed every time a new blockchain transaction is added to the chain. So on the Ethereum blockchain, this would be every 12 seconds. So in summary, a blockchain is literally just a distributed payments network or a digital public ledger. So now you may be thinking, a blockchain sounds very similar to Venmo. What's the difference? Why should I use a blockchain? Well, what separates a blockchain network from something like centralized like a Venmo is that blockchains are purely peer-to-peer. Venmo is a centralized company, and at the end of the day, they are in control of your funds. They rely on their own company database that's centralized and mutable, which means it's editable. Blockchain takes the exact opposite approach. In lieu of some central intermediary and its centralized servers, blockchains use these things called nodes and validators. These are basically just computers connected to Wi-Fi running the blockchain. Anyone with the right computer hardware and internet connection can tap into the blockchain and be a node. And these nodes are responsible for updating the chain and maintaining the state. Some people do this as a hobby, and others operate nodes as a business. The more nodes a chain has and more locations, the more decentralized that chain is. And decentralization is critical for a lot of reasons. The first is functionality. If your blockchain only has operational nodes in, let's say, Miami, Florida, and a hurricane came through and cut the power, the chain would stop working because all the nodes would go down. Another thing that makes blockchains different is that they're immutable, meaning they cannot be altered once a transaction has occurred. All these things lay the foundation for a new digital economy, where digital products can be owned and traded just like physical ones. So to recap, we know the chain is a payment system comprised of historical transaction feed and grouped into blocks. The state is just the current balance of all accounts, and the network is the act of many different people in different locations running nodes. And together, this is the blockchain network, or this is a blockchain network. So now that we've level set on the basics, we can dive into smart contracts. And the goal of this section is to, one, understand the advantages and limitations of smart contracts, and two, explore ways smart contracts can play a larger role in the future of business and finance. Okay, evolution of the contract. So contracts have been along since the beginning of time. A contract is a formal agreement between two or more parties and involves the transfer of goods and services or money, or a promise to transfer those at a future date. And like most things, the contract has benefited from technological upgrades. Each upgrade has resulted in some efficiencies. So the written contract, enabled by a strong legal system, made it easy to document terms and hold people accountable. The e-contract, enabled by the computer and the internet, made it easy to sign and send contracts via email. So what makes smart contracts worthy of their own distinct call-out? It's the role it plays in value transfer. Just as e-contracts made signing easier, smart contracts help automate and execute the transfer of value from one party to another more efficiently and more transparently. And smart contracts were made possible by the advancements made in blockchain technology and code. So what is a smart contract? In its most stripped down form, a smart contract is just self-executing code. And while there's plenty of use cases, its core function, by design, is to facilitate the transfer of value as defined in the terms of the contract. One way of thinking about this is breaking it down into two parts. The first is the code itself, which are just instructions broken out into a series of if-then statements. If this thing happens, then execute this action. The second part is the account balance. Just like people, smart contracts have an account with a balance stored on the state. This account can receive and distribute money to the parties of the contract based on the terms it's encoded with. So a smart contract is just self-executing code paired with a blockchain account address. Okay. So next we're going to talk about oracles. Inherently, blockchains and smart contracts are great at facilitating the actual transfer of value. But when it comes to interacting with the outside world and events, they need some assistance. Resources external to the blockchain network, like real-world data and events, are considered off-chain, while data already stored on the blockchain is considered on-chain. These two things are not inherently connected to one another. But what if I wanted to write a smart contract where the trigger was based on an outcome of a real-world event, like the Super Bowl? That's where oracles come in. In Greek mythology, oracles were thought to be portals through which the gods spoke directly to people. In blockchain, oracles serve as a bridge between the off-chain and the on-chain data. Major industries benefit from the combining of oracles and smart contracts, including asset prices for finance, weather information for insurance, randomness for gaming, and IoT sensors for supply chain. Another way to think of this is, in many cases, oracles provide the supply of triggers for the if-then statement that we talked about in the previous slide. So they serve as a bridge between the on-chain and off-chain data. Going back to the Super Bowl example, let's pretend it's February, we're in Vegas, and Phil and I want to bet on the Super Bowl with each other. And let's say the 49ers are representing the NFC and the Dolphins are representing the AFC. And each of us agree to bet $100. So Phil and I set up a smart contract that says, if the 49ers win Super Bowl 58, then money is sent to Trey. But if the Dolphins win Super Bowl 58, then money is sent to Phil. Now that the code is set up, we each send $100 to the smart contract address. So we have the code written with our if-then statements, and the smart contract account is now funded. But how will it know who wins and when? That's where we need an oracle. And lucky for us, there's a service called Chainlink that provides these oracles so that as soon as the game ends, the contract is triggered and the money is immediately distributed to the winner. Okay, so when does it make sense then to use a smart contract over a traditional contract? Smart contracts are ideal for transactions that require a high level of automation and security. Think binary decisions. Whereas traditional contracts are more suitable for complex transactions that require flexibility, human judgment, and legal enforceability. Additionally, traditional contracts have long established legal framework that can be relied upon in case of a dispute or breach. In many cases, a hybrid approach can be used, combining the strengths of both traditional contracts and smart contracts. For example, a traditional contract can outline the general terms and conditions of a business agreement, while the specific aspects or clauses can be executed through the smart contract, automating certain processes and ensuring transparency. So until the legal framework is better adapted to understand smart contracts, people and businesses can use a hybrid approach to maximize efficiency, transparency, and enforceability. Okay, now let's get to the use cases. So we've talked about the Super Bowl. Now let's talk about fantasy football or March Madness. Each year in our office, we do a March Madness bracket. We have 10 people on our team. The buy-in is typically $100, which makes the total pot $1,000. Not bad. We decided that first place gets 80%, second place gets 15%, and third place gets 5%. You can think of these parameters as the contract terms. As the organizer last year, everyone gave me their money at the beginning of March, but instead of holding it into a bank account, I thought it would be wise to invest it in Bitcoin. The issue was Bitcoin did not go up in March. It went down a lot. So this year, the team has asked that we put money into escrow and not give it to me. But instead of paying a service to hold the funds, Phil and I, being the code wizards we are, offered to set up a smart contract. First, we set up the code with our if-then statements. Then we had everyone send the contract $100. So the account balance of the contract is now $1,000. And finally, we connected the contract to an NCAA March Madness oracle so that we knew once the tournament was over, the winner would get paid out. And everyone is much happy this year with this solution. And because it's just our work team and the stakes are somewhat low, this is a great use case for a pure smart contract play. No need to involve a traditional legal contract. The next use case we want to highlight is real estate. So I want you to imagine there's a new development in downtown Baltimore. And let's say it's going to cost $10 million to build. And let's say the group building the building is willing to sell 10,000 shares in a development at $1,000 a share to fund the cost. So we expect the total income from renters each month to be $50,000 and the expenses to be $1,000. That's not a bad cash flow business. And traditionally, developers would maybe reach out to 2 or 3 investors that would buy up the shares. But what if I wanted to buy in? And what if Phil wanted to buy in? And what if everyone on this call wanted to buy in to this development? Well, today, a developer would never let that happen. Can you imagine the headache each month of distributing the $50,000 income to 100 or 1,000 different people, each with a different percentage of share of ownership? It would be an administrative nightmare. Well, lucky for these developers, Phil and I are expert coders, and we can set up a smart contract that automates this. So first, we'd set up the code with our instructions. We'd set up a nice front-end website so renters can pay directly into the smart contract. And now every time a renter pays rent, it's automatically distributed to the shareholders based on how many shares they own. And for expenses, we tie an Oracle back to our Amex and have it auto-deduct monthly expenses from the following payout. Now we all can participate in large real estate projects thanks to smart contracts. And this is a great example of a use case where you'd want to use a hybrid model. So the smart contract could handle the money, but any dispute with a renter can be settled in court with a traditional contract. So next, I'm going to give it to Phil to discuss the parametric use case.
Hi there. Thanks, Joe. It's really, really helpful. So obviously I get the exciting part, the insurance piece. So before we dive into this, just a bit of context behind parametric insurance. Parametric literally is a binary option. So if it fits wonderfully with smart contracts in terms of the predicted payout is already quantified and the input or the claim amount needs to be quantified as well. So we can put together smart contract parametric insurance policies. So the example we have here is where we could have multiple levels of payouts depending on flooding. So if rainfall in a day is 10 millimeters, we would consider that acceptable levels. This would be provided, as Trey discussed, by an Oracle on the ground, an IoT sensor, Internet of Things, that would allow insurers instant insight to claims. This not only shortens the claims paying timeline, which is perfect because one of the big frustrations clients face is the ability of claims to be handled, but also is much more efficient for carriers because they can quantify the aggregate exposure. So it allows for a spectrum of payments. So here we have 10 millimeters of nil payout, 20 millimeters at 1,000, up to 50 millimeters at 4,000, and it caps the total amount that they'd be paying. It also allows a much quicker, more diverse payment methodology because it would allow every single person who had a digital asset wallet to have that payment arrive instantaneously. Now, the other great functionality of blockchain, I use blockchain trades as crypto. Blockchain is that it's a 24 hours a day, 7-day a week, 365 days a year technology. You are not constrained by when banks are open. So it allows for that payment when people really need it. So here again, assuming that Trey and I are expert coders, the code instruction would be if rain exceeds whatever the millimeter of rain is, then send 80% of total pots, obviously from the long slide. There would be send amount to the insurance address. The Oracle is the rainfall gauge. I mean, this is a much more streamlined version of events than occurs at the moment. Also, it allows for payments globally. So you do not have the same settlement times, but for international transfers, it also takes out a lot of the costs involved when transferring from country to country. So this is a sort of a use case that insurers are exploring, and is something that we believe will come about eventually. But there are, as Trey pointed out, some issues that come with smart contracts, which we're going to cover now. so smart contract risks and solutions. So whenever we introduce new technology, it introduces new risks. Smart contract users, investors, face the risk of losing asset deposit smart contract if it fails. Same way that if a bank fails, you lose your money. So smart contracts failing is the same. The issue is, if a smart contract fails, what do you do as an investor? In one of the previous examples, Trey used the analogy of an escrow agent. Now, escrow agents buy insurance to protect themselves from third-party claims in event of the failure of their professional services. Now, what do you do when it's a smart contract? Smart contracts are technically offering a professional service. They can be breached, there can be errors in operations, they can malfunction. So what do you do? Especially because a lot of these smart contracts are developed by Trey and I, let's use that as an example, and then funded by the decentralized demographic of people that are putting cash into the smart contracts. They're often run by what we call a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization. So there is no single entity. So you have no recourse against anyone. So how do we de-risk these smart contracts in today's society, especially when we're talking about large institutions that are looking to drive efficiencies via smart contracts? So one of the things that we're thinking is we need to have some insurance in place. Insurance of smart contracts. We're going to touch on the next slide a bit about some of the losses that we've seen in the financial institution space, but also what we've seen in the smart contract space. So coming back to it, these are a couple of examples of financial institution errors that were covered by insurance claims, not Aon clients and not ones that I underwrote. Let's caveat that very clearly. These are publicly available information figures. And second are what we see in smart contracts. So the first one here is what is called a trade error, affectionately known as a fat finger trade error. This is where a trader was attempting to make a trade for $5 million, but accidentally added an extra zero. So all of a sudden, Citigroup made a $50 million trade versus $5 million trade. This led to a loss to Citigroup of $50 million. This was covered by Citigroup's financial institutions policy underneath their professional indemnity. This is an example of how these policies can bring comfort not only to investors, but also to the institutions that are utilizing trading platforms. The bigger version of events, the bigger issue is more the Knight Capital issue. So this is where we had Knight Capital are a market-making trading services company. They issued a software update to one of their trading algorithms. Now, trading algorithms are highly proprietary black boxes, often not tested. Now, this update led to Knight Capital's trading algorithm misinterpreting certain market signals and buying and selling off over $440 million worth of assets, leading to a collapse in its market cap and the eventual winding up of Knight Capital. So we can see that there are inherent vulnerabilities and issues in the traditional finance world. Now, what else when we evolve into Web3 space and smart contracts, what new vulnerabilities represent them? What new vulnerabilities present themselves? So one of the big issues is governance issues. So here we have Beanstalk Farm. So bit of context, one of the wonders of the decentralized financial space is that it allows you to take out what are called flash loans. These wouldn't be available in sort of the traditional finance space due to the multiple parties that you have to interact with prior to being able to realize credit. However, via smart contracts, one can instantaneously check your creditworthiness and whether you should be allowed a loan of a certain amount of size, depending on the collateral you hold in your account. This allows certain individuals to take out very large loans for only a matter of seconds, if needs be. So flash loans have been utilized often across smart contracts and the blockchain space for what they call governance breaches. So Beanstalk Farms itself was a lending platform where participants were able to vote on where to lend money to. Now, that pool of voting rights, the voting rights themselves are tokens, and you could purchase those tokens to then decide who to lend to. So someone very smart and utilizing some quite sort of clever financial engineering, utilized the flash loan, borrowed over $1 billion to purchase over 61% of voting tokens within Beanstalk Farms, to then vote to themselves a loan of $182 million before disappearing. These are the type of exposures that only come about with the evolution of financial markets. With great speed comes great exposure. So these are all things that people are learning, and it's a very exciting space for this very reason. I mean, the second example here, maybe not so much smart contract related, but it's still an example of how blockchains can be utilized by nefarious actors. So this was the Ronin network. Some of you may be aware of the Axie Infinity gaming platform that is blockchain based. Basically, North Korean protagonists, supposedly, managed to seize control over 50% of the nodes that were operating on the Ronin network. Now, as Trey said, the network is only as secure as your decentralization. If you have more than 50% of the network validation nodes, you can then start validating your own transactions. So the hacking group behind the Ronin network hack managed to divert $625 million away from this network. So that was just lost. So what can we do to help bring trust and safety to the space? Yeah, next slide, Trey. So Aon's role in de-risking, I mean, Aon historically is a risk mitigation, de-risking insurance brokerage. We, as Trey commented on earlier, we work on the strategy side of the growth ventures arm, and we are looking at how to bring trust and safety to the Web3 space. We view ourselves as being facilitators in the movement from off-chain to on-chain with regards to institutions, be it large or small, and we want to de-risk this space for them. Now, the one thing that insurance companies need is data. Everyone loves data. But there's a classic sort of chicken and egg situation here, which is how do you gather data without insuring things? And then how do you insure things without data? So we've taken a proactive approach in terms of working with some of the leading minds in this field to try and understand, to try and quantify what these new exposures are that are arising from the transition to Web3. We see this space as being an enabler of all sorts of different wonderful technologies and new products. Trey talked about blockchain having its broadband moment. I mean, Facebook was only invented in 2004. Broadband was 2000. This is a very nascent technology in the grand scheme of the internet. The internet's been around since the 1960s. So we're very early, but I'd rather be early than late in this space. So we are looking at working with clients to de-risk, to allow them to realize the true nature of Web3 and to unlock meaningful capital into the space. I mean, I'm happy to take any questions. I can see there are some in the chat. So I'll pass back to Trey. I mean, there are a couple here. Should we?
Yeah, no, that was great. Yeah, Sanjay, Tanis, I'm not sure if you're going to do the questions or moderate the questions, but yeah.
I can moderate the questions. The first is from Ifyani Ajay Billy from Morgan State University, wanting to find out the difference between the Ethereum blockchain versus the traditional Bitcoin permissionless blockchain.
Yeah, I can take that one. So first of all, good question. The Bitcoin blockchain is purely a value transfer blockchain. What I mean by that is there are no smart contracts that can work on the Bitcoin blockchain.
Right. Sorry, Trey.
And
Trey, sorry to interrupt. There are some smart contracts that operate on the blockchain network. The main sort of that's on the Bitcoin network. Sorry, the main sort of two differences between Bitcoin and Ethereum is the different utilizations of proof of work versus proof of stake. One being much more efficient than the other, but they also have different coding mechanisms. So Ethereum runs on Solidity, and Solidity's smart contract language allows for far greater and in-depth development of smart contracts than the original Bitcoin smart contracts that were developed. And also the Ethereum smart contracts allow for greater interoperability. Solidity allows for a greater range of decentralized applications to be developed. That's the two main sort of differences.
Mhm.
Bitcoin smart contracts aren't really utilized as much anymore, but yeah, most people are building on EVMs on Ethereum smart contract network.
Thank you very much. We have a question from an anonymous attendee. For everybody out here, please, when you ask questions in the Q&A, please mention your affiliation and the role. Are you a student, faculty, and your affiliation? So from this anonymous attendee, I won't read out the entire question, but it's to do with the innovation. In your very last slide, you had some innovation, and this deals with are parametric insurance schemes better administered by the small, nimble companies rather than the large corporations? And it's really a philosophical question about the role of the small, nimble startups versus large companies. How do you see yourself in that? As a large insurance company, what are the threats from these small startups?
I'll take it. I mean, it's a very interesting question. I think the use of household names and parametric insurance. I mean, most parametric insurance companies are utilized for at the moment. Most parametric insurance at the moment is used for weather events. They're usually much more commercial focused than we would see for perhaps. I'm going to try and name some American on the ground insurance companies like Allstate or whoever it might be. But we would see parametric mainly playing a place in the reinsurance market currently. Why it hasn't filtered down to more on the ground is probably, with all these things, a lack of data, a lack of distribution. But do I think that insurance schemes are better administered by startups or existing insurance companies? It's a very, very good question. The barriers to entry for small startups in insurance are incredibly high. There's huge regulatory burdens, be it in terms of not only the licenses required, but also the capital requirements that are needed to start an insurance company. So that is always going to be a barrier to entry to anyone. It's also how do you find your edge? Like, where is your data asymmetry that allows you to play in a space that no one else is playing in? Now, if we really wanted to get into it, we could talk about administered, because that's a good word to use here. There are some insurtech-enabled businesses that are very, very nimble and very good at what they do. Same way in any line of industry. Why are they not so many in insurance, you might ask? The lack of data sharing, I'd have to say. I mean, how do you gather? It comes back to the point with regards to smart contracts and how we insure them, or any of these things. There is a lack of data. Like, you cannot go and write insurance without having a rater, a model, some form of thesis that you can then show to a carrier who's going to reinsure you. So it's almost twofold. There's high barriers to entry if you want to start your own insurance company. And then if you are wanting to administer or distribute insurance for a reinsurance or an insurance company, it's that what data asymmetry, what distribution model do you have that's different? What are you going to give that insurance company that they don't have at the moment? Because why would they not be doing it themselves? So I think that there isn't a right or wrong whether these things are administered better by startups or not. I think it's more, what edge do you have? What data do you have? Like, how are you doing something that's different to the status quo?
Thank you, Phil. Next question is from Dr. Hasavari from Morgan State University, and she wants to find out more about Oracle. Does Oracle act like a client application? Is it merely a data sharing scheme? And should an Oracle be, let's say, an Oracle app or something Oracle? The Oracle itself doesn't convey much of a meaningful term associated with blockchain. So what's the response to that?
Yeah, I think I would go back to just the Oracle is a bridge between off-chain data and on-chain data. And so events that occur off-chain need to somehow get communicated to the on-chain code to trigger some type of code execution. And so the Oracle provides that bridge. So in the case of the Super Bowl example, it was the who won the Super Bowl. The Oracle relays the winner to the code on the blockchain, and the smart contract executes that code based on the answer it got from the Oracle. I think I'm reading the question, and she's talking about the real estate example. And in that example, the Oracle was the credit card company. And so the credit card company would relay to the blockchain how much money was spent on the credit card that month. And the smart contract would take that information and deduct those funds from the rent distribution. And so you can think of an Oracle as just a bridge between off-chain events and on-chain execution. Hopefully that answered your question.
Thank you, Trey. Question from Eric Brooks from Morgan State University, and this really pertains to Aeon itself. Wants to find out how big Aeon is. Does it have an IPO? Is it publicly traded?
Yeah, Phil, go ahead.
Yeah, Aeon is currently publicly traded. It's a very large organization, headquartered in Chicago and London. Happy to chat more about it if anyone wants to reach out at any time.
We have a follow-up question from Ifeanyi from Morgan State, and this deals with the SEC. Is SEC against blockchain investments? And what is Aeon doing to regulate this space?
I'll take this one again, Trey. I can't talk for the SEC's positions on blockchain. I don't think they can sometimes. No, I'm joking. I don't know what it depends. I mean, there's something called the Howey principle, which was originally the idea of what a security was, which is, it's got 3 points to it, which I can't remember off the top of my head currently, embarrassingly. But if you type in Howey, Howey principle, that will come up on top of Google. I don't think they are. I think the important thing to remember is crypto and blockchain are 2 different things. So crypto is the utilization of blockchain. Blockchain technology can be used for many different things. So is the SEC against blockchain investment? I don't think so. Is the SEC against certain nefarious actors in the blockchain space? Yes, the same way be against any nefarious actors in any financial space. Interestingly, there's a lot of discussion across the US about who should be regulating the crypto space, if you want to call it that. Aeon is a member of the Chamber of Digital Currency, and we have regular discussions amongst many other leading companies in the space. We believe that regulation is a good thing, not a bad thing. With all these things, there are some, I mean, if you look at Europe, we've recently enacted MiCA, which is a big regulatory framework for how to handle these currencies. Switzerland's very sort of proactive, progressive, as is Singapore, Dubai. I think everyone has a right to have a view on it. But I wouldn't say that the SEC is actively against blockchain. It's probably the best way to say it.
Thanks. There was a follow-up question on SEC, but I think you've answered that. There's a question from Lorenzo Lugo, a finance major at Morehouse. It's an interesting question. Is what are the projects you're doing related to smart contracts or any past projects you've worked on? And what are the competitors doing in the space?
I'll take this one again as well. I can talk about what is publicly available knowledge. I mean, I'm not going to share too much of our secret sauce about what we're doing in this space, but we are looking at how we handle smart contract exposure. I'll leave it at that. But we have also been working Aon has been working in the sort of Web3 digital assets crypto space since 2013. We placed one of the first and one of the largest insurance policies for Coinbase in terms of their custody. We have a facility for their custody that goes up to $1 billion. That's for crime-related risks, because that was obviously one of the biggest threats to start with, one of the biggest exposures that people had. Something that's come out of AGV that we can talk about, I suppose, would be staking and slashing. So staking is the method that is utilized by proof of stake blockchains, so Ethereum, which underwent its Shanghai upgrade recently, or fork. That is the idea of lending your Ethereum to the blockchain to help validate transactions that are going through it. So one of the issues that can come about is if you stake your Ethereum to a node operator, if that node operator were to incorrectly validate a transaction, you have to have if you were to stake your Ethereum to that node operator, and that node operator were to incorrectly validate that transaction, then your stake, which is 32 ETH, would be slashed. So that's the stick for why you don't want to validate stuff incorrectly. But with all these things, you need a carrot as well. So one of the upsides of staking your Ethereum to a node operator is that you earn rewards. So if you stake 32 ETH, depending on the volume of validations and how many people are operating nodes, you will earn a reward paid in ETH on your ETH that is staked on the platform, on the blockchain, sorry. I think that answers the question. I hope so anyway.
Thanks, Phil. The next question from Dr. Hasavari. It's an interesting one, and this relates to AI helping blockchain, blockchain helping AI, etc. And how do they work together?
So let's work backwards on this one. The discussions around why AI can be a threat to blockchain, I don't think it's more, from my understanding, it's often the point of like why it can be an issue for smart contracts. So there's a famous case recently where someone took a smart contract code and dropped it into ChatGPT and said, look for errors in my smart contract. Look for errors in my code. Where are the vulnerabilities in this? So I don't think this is actually more a blockchain issue. I think it's more of a cyber and also digital world issue. I think we're going to see a lot more cyber events occurring. I mean, you speak to any cyber insurer, coming back to insurance, about cyber vulnerabilities, and also the number of ransomware attacks that have only increased over the last year. That has been driven predominantly by people utilizing AI to write better worded emails. One of the big things that you see when you're looking for phishing or spoofing emails is often poor grammar, poor spelling. We've all done the training. So by utilizing OpenAI and ChatGPT, you can put together better worded emails, more targeted emails, and you can send out a lot more with them. I mean, one of my favorite quotes when it comes to AI, someone was speaking to said, given the ability for it to code twice as fast, do you think we'll see half the number of coders? And the response is, no, I just think we'll see twice as much code. But then with regards to blockchain utilization and AI, one of the things that is sort of people are discussing is how do you handle data requests? How do you handle sort of personal data? How do you have data trust? Like, how do you store these things securely? How do you store your sovereign identity? Now, by operating your own blockchain wallet, you can allow access to ChatGPT, but then close off that access. So there's a lot of talk about utilizing blockchain to control AI. So I think that's more interesting than the sort of AI destroying or maybe causing vulnerabilities in smart contracts. My biggest worry, if I really want to talk about it, is Web3 and quantum computing, because that's a completely different story. I mean, we can get onto elliptical curve cryptography and the sort of solving of that by quantum computing like that. But I mean, I think if we do ever get to that stage, I think that the failure of blockchain will be just a very small part of the global downfall that will occur because we all use SSL technology left, right, and center for our day-to-day lives. So in the grand scheme of things, I'm not super worried about that, even like though I can be a bit anxious about lots of different things. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, and I would just add on to that, Phil's great response. One way AI has significantly impacted crypto is funding. And so AI is certainly the flavor of the month. That was crypto 2 years ago. AI has kind of taken its place on the throne. So funding for crypto right now or blockchains, protocols, crypto companies is down while funding for AI is up. But I think we do believe that crypto and AI will be symbiotic, where once you tell an AI to do something, the AI may have to go pay for something. And how is it going to do that? It's going to use blockchains and crypto because it's native to the internet.
Thank you, Phil and Trey. Talking about the funding side of AI and crypto, NVIDIA was during the dark days that of the crypto industry, the NVIDIA's stock price was totally decimated. And then along came AI in a few months' time, and now it's the market darling.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's a fascinating story
Great
of
analogy. Yeah.
Crypto and AI. We have a question from Ojo Nugwa from Morgan State University. There are several questions. The one I would want you all to talk about would be the Ethereum gas fees. They vary a lot. They can be very high. And can we really implement very large continuous smart contracts using, let's say, the Ethereum or proof of stake protocols? And this is compared to traditional contracts. So the question deals with the cost of contracts and not necessarily the other aspects that deal with the efficiency, et cetera, of smart contracts.
Trey, do you want to talk about layer twos?
Sure. Yeah. So the question around Ethereum gas fees is a concern, and it has been a concern in the industry for a number of years. And as a function of that, there have been many researchers working on solutions to solve this problem. And just to give a brief context around the problem, if there's a lot of activity on the Ethereum blockchain, for example, everyone wants to mint an NFT, or it's noon on a Friday and everyone's sending each other money, the fees will spike. They spike because everyone's fighting to get their transaction into that next block. So as a result, you've had researchers looking at different types of solutions. Some have come up with next-gen blockchains, L1s, like Solana, Sui, Aptos. Others have come up with layer 2 solutions, so solutions that fit on top of the blockchain. This is like, you may have heard of solutions like Optimism, Arbitrum, Coinbase's Base. These package a bunch of transactions up together and hash them into one. And so you could essentially take 10,000 transactions on Base, hash it into one transaction on Ethereum. And so you're amortizing those 10,000 transaction fees down to one. But it's a great call out. It is an issue. My personal belief is that these next generation blockchains are going to win and kind of surpass Ethereum. On Solana, for example, they have parallel execution, which means instead of fighting for the same block space, everyone can submit their transactions in parallel, where fees kind of just look like this flat line. It's constantly, and Visa just published a report on this, on why they're using the Solana blockchain to transact payments. It's because if you look at the Ethereum blockchain, the fees kind of spike like this and spike back down. On Solana, because of parallel transaction processing, it's just a flat line like this. But to the question, people have been thinking about this. It is a major concern. And part of the reason why Visa identified blockchains entering in their broadband era is because a lot of people in the space viewed this problem as solved between the L2s and next-gen blockchains like Solana.
I might just have a go at answering the first question as well with regards to sort of regulatory crackdowns. Yeah, I mean, we have seen a wave of anti-crypto related sanction policies. I think that with a lot of these, well, regulators, you mentioned here, a lot of it was politicized. So we are already seeing rolling back in terms of China. Hong Kong has instigated a friendly framework again for blockchain. We are seeing them looking to large institutions to be houses for stablecoins, CBDCs, Singapore as well. MiCA in the EU as well is a very good framework that's being put into place. I think US, Canada, I can't so much talk to. The US has its issues, but I think with all new technologies, it takes a while. I mean, there's a very famous cartoon. I don't know if anyone's seen it. It might just be me. When the automobile car was first developed in the UK, when they were driving around, you used to have a man that would stand in front of the car with a red flag warning that the car was coming. So with all technology, with all innovations, people are scared. People don't know how it works. And I think we're just trying to sort of quantify and bring some trust to the space. I think that comes to your second point. And maybe I'm misreading the question, so apologies. But we're not going to be doing risk assessments using smart contracts. The idea is, and let's caveat this for a second, we will not be doing risk assessments on smart contracts. That is not our wheelhouse. But there are some very sort of young, bright startups that are utilizing a mixture of ML, AI, and well-founded practices that already exist within the cybersecurity space to review smart contract code and the governance structure behind it. So I don't see the auditing validation of smart contracts as driving centralization. If anything, it's providing the safe railroads for further decentralization.
Thank you very much. Decentralization seems to be the way to go for many of these cases, especially in the finance sector, as you've pointed out. We are at the end of our time out here. I wish we had more time. This has been a fascinating discussion, a fascinating webinar. So thank you, Phil. Thank you, Trey. Thank you, Robin from Aon, from the FinTech team. Thanks a lot, Dionysia, Dr. Emdad, for making this possible. This is part of the web series that we have in this particular space of blockchain and FinTech. Please wait for announcements for future webinars in the space.
Dr. Babin, if I just say one thing, I believe that we will be having a table at the career fair tomorrow. So please swing by if you want to learn more about Aon, and please follow up with any questions if you have any for Trey and I. But thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.